Hey, back with the book. Chapter 10 is all about consolidation. And what was really interesting and the biggest takeaway for me was that with consolidation, a lot of times as teachers, especially in the I do, we do, you do scenario, a lot of times near the end of class, we'll take up a question that is very complex and nuanced because as a teacher, I want to give you all the tools you need to be able to do any question I throw at you in the homework. But the challenge is that if you do that, you actually end up losing most of your students because they're not at that level yet that they can understand or challenge themselves with the nuances. And they're not at the level where they could even take any of that stuff in. So you actually lose like 90% of your class. So the strategy actually is to what's called, instead of leveling to the top question you're going to assign, level to the bottom. So as class is going on, take a look at where the class is. And if you're going to take a question up as a consolidation strategy or identify patterns that people are seeing, that kind of thing, make sure you start with a question that everybody has done and has been successful at. In doing that, or leveling to the bottom, as they refer to it, you actually end up engaging all the students, and then you're able to then progressively. So, say you had a bunch of groups in the class and they're all working on different tasks. If you started with one that everybody got, then you can talk about that one. And then as you move through, you'll carry the students with you a little bit more. And because you spend so much time talking about the nuances of a question that everybody understood, then you can actually just identify patterns. So then as you go to the next question, we can say, okay, so what are some similarities between this question and what we just saw? What are some differences? How do we deal with those differences? Is it different or is it the same approach? And so those kinds of questions actually help students then move and level up better than if you had started with the top end question and tried to gather everybody into that level. So that was really interesting. Other really interesting thing was about who talks about their work. So say I go around class and I see a bunch of work on different boards that I want to use as talking points. What you can do as a teacher is establish a rule. So for example, choose a color that's always the teacher's color. And if you put it in a box, then the students can erase that work and they have to leave it because that's going to be a conversation component. Also, it gives them a heads up about what we're going to be talking about. So then students can be kind of prepared and feel really confident about that squared section, which is nice. But you don't actually want students to present their own work because that's like rule number one. If you want students to check out and disengage, have students present their own work. Because as soon as a student starts talking about what they've done, everybody else checks out and stops listening. So what's really cool is actually what you do is you go around to the different boards, stand up like you did in the huddle. You can do this in the middle of class. You can do this at the end of class. It really depends on the flow of your room and how things are going. So when you're at a point where you want to tie a couple of things together, as consolidation should be done, what you're going to do is you're going to then walk over. You can either just have the kids huddle around you and then talk about couple of key points back and forth like we did at the beginning of class to get started. Or what's actually more successful is to start walking around to different boards and taking a look at stuff that you have put boxes around. So make sure you make note of I want to talk about this and then this and this. Try to have them from different spots around the classroom. So you're not just walking in a circle, you're actually jumping around. You don't have to talk about everybody's board every time. So you don't have to find something on everything. Just find a couple. Just make sure you hit everybody's board over the span of 2 weeks or whatever. And then what you're going to do is when you get to somebody's board, you're going to ask the group, what do they think the students were thinking when they made that choice? Or what were the students doing when they decided to write that piece of information down? Or what assumption were they making? Or why did they frame it this way? Or why did they draw the picture? Why did they include this? And have the students think about the work that group did. And then have the students kind of give out some ideas and just brainstorm about what the thinking was, what the ideas are, patterns emerging, and highlight that kind of stuff. So you have the group talk about what's going on in the board, not actually have the students talk about their own work. And you can have the students that did the work be part of the conversation, but don't have them direct the conversation, which is really cool. So that's kind of the trick with consolidation, is kind of flow into it and out of it as it makes sense in the room, as you feel like things need to be tied up. Start the question that everyone was super successful with. And if there's a nuanced hint that you really want in there that hasn't been done yet, the trick is actually to go around as you're talking to groups. If you have a group that's kind of near where you wanted them to be, but not quite, if you give them a hint to kind of lead them where you want them to go, so they end up writing down something you wanted to highlight, then 9 times out of 10, they'll end up, if you give them a hint to kind of nudge them in the right direction, that'll end up on the board before the end of class. And then you can use that as a discussion piece. So anyways, that is consolidating for you.